It was a Tuesday night in Los Angeles, and the crowd at Jimmy Kimmel Live had just finished clapping as the band faded out. Jimmy was flashing his usual smirk, tapping his notes against the desk as he welcomed his next guest, Jonathan Roumie, dressed in a sleek black suit with a smile that didn't need rehearsing. Jonathan walked out to thunderous applause, gave a small wave to the white boys, hugged Jimmy like an old friend, and sat down with his legs crossed, posture straight, the epitome of grace under studio lights. Jimmy opened with the usual banter. "Jonathan, you look like you just walked off a GQ cover and straight into a gritty crime drama at the same time," he joked. Jonathan chuckled lightly. "Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment," he replied, tucking a loose strand of hair behind his ear. The audience laughed, and for a few minutes, it felt like every other celebrity interview. Light, playful, no sharp edges. They talked about his recent roles, the excitement of his latest project, and his charity work. But under the ease, Jonathan knew how this worked. Sit in the chair, smile, keep it casual, let them get their jokes in, don't push back too hard. Still, something in his eyes said he wasn't there just to play the game. Not this time. Jimmy flipped his cue card and leaned back. "So your latest series is doing pretty well," he said. "You've got some fans, but you know, some critics, emphasis on some, have said your acting is, well, kind of trashy TV drama." The crowd gave a confused chuckle, some laughs louder than others, unsure if they were supposed to. It was one of those jokes meant to sound like a sarcastic jab, but it didn't land well. Jonathan didn't laugh. He smiled, but it was different now. His expression didn't shift much, but you could feel the air tighten. He looked at Jimmy, calm but focused, as if weighing something. Jimmy, sensing the tension, quickly added, "I mean, that's not me, obviously. I'm just saying what's out there." Jonathan tilted his head slightly. He said slowly, letting the moment breathe. Jimmy moved on, clearly hoping to smooth things over. "But hey, I mean, it's catchy. The people love it. It's like comfort food for your eyes, right?" That line got a few chuckles, but the vibe had changed. Not dramatically, but something had shifted. Jimmy knew it too. He laughed again, a nervous chuckle, but Jonathan just nodded slowly, still smiling politely. "Interesting comparison," Jonathan said. "The thing is, one makes people happy, and the other tries to make fun of what makes people happy." That line went over most heads for now. Jimmy smiled and tried to keep the conversation light. "So what's the craziest thing a fan has ever thrown at you on stage?" Jonathan played along, describing a humorous incident involving a fan who threw a scarf on stage during a live performance. But he hadn't forgotten that earlier jab. It was still there, simmering. The floor manager glanced at the segment timer, then at Jonathan. The producers behind the camera exchanged looks, wondering if they should signal Jimmy to wrap it up early. But Jonathan wasn't going to let the moment slide. He wasn't going to let it pass unnoticed. Jimmy leaned forward in his chair, trying to pick the energy back up. "All right, so let's talk about your latest project." The teaser looked amazing. "It's dramatic with tons of suspense," he said, flipping through his notes again. "It's got that polished, big-budget drama feel, like if Netflix met a Hollywood blockbuster." The audience laughed again, louder this time. Jimmy was finding his rhythm, or so he thought. Jonathan shifted in his seat slightly, hands folded in his lap. He wasn't fidgeting, he was preparing. Then casually, Jimmy dropped it. "Honestly, Jonathan, don't hate me for saying this, but sometimes your acting feels, well, trashy TV drama. You know what I mean?" A split second, that's all it took. The room didn't go silent, but it got weird. Laughter came out, but it was thinner this time, unsure. The audience didn't know if he was still joking or if he'd just crossed the line. Even the band didn't chime in with their usual cues. Jonathan looked at him for a long beat. Not angry, not even surprised, just still. Then he tilted his head slightly, like he was looking at someone different than who he expected to see across from him. He smiled that same soft, slow smile he gives before hitting the high note of a song people think they know but don't. "Well, Jimmy," he said, his voice smooth and steady, just loud enough to fill the room without forcing it. "I guess that's why I'm winning awards while you're still telling jokes about other people's talent." The audience didn't laugh. They reacted with loud gasps, a few whoops, and someone in the back audibly said, "Damn," like it had escaped without permission. Jimmy's face froze for half a second. His mouth opened like he was going to say something, but no words came out right away. He blinked, swallowed, then gave one of those half laughs people do when they don't quite know what else to do. "Okay," he said, raising both hands. "Touché." Touché. Jonathan didn't gloat, he didn't smirk. He just leaned back slightly, keeping eye contact, still smiling like a mentor who just corrected a student and didn't feel the need to repeat himself. Jimmy tried to pivot. Look, I was kidding, obviously. I mean, come on, Trashy. That's not what I meant. Your fans know I'm kidding, right? He looked toward the audience, fishing for backup. A few nervous chuckles echoed back, but it was clear the room had shifted. Jonathan sat up straighter now. It's fine, he said, brushing the hair off his shoulder. I've been called worse by better. The audience exploded in applause. The band dropped in with a quick, jazzy sting, and the cameras caught Jimmy with a frozen grin on his face as he reached for his mug of water like it was suddenly full of hot sauce. He chuckled again, trying to stay afloat. You've got bite, Jonathan. I like that. Jonathan just shrugged. I've got truth, Jimmy. Some people aren't used to hearing it on camera. By this point, the tension wasn't awkward anymore. It felt real, raw and unfiltered, undeniably human. Jimmy was scrambling now, trying to salvage it with charm, but it was too late. The moment had taken over the show. The producers behind the camera exchanged glances, and backstage, the buzz began. This wasn't just a PR moment. This was something rare, something authentic. Jimmy, despite his nerves, couldn't deny that Jonathan had just reminded everyone that you could stand up for yourself, calmly with dignity. It was a moment that would resonate far beyond the studio walls. The point where the laughter wasn't nervous anymore, it was real. People weren't laughing at a joke. They were laughing because they couldn't believe what they had just seen. It was raw, unfiltered, live, and undeniably human. Jimmy, scrambling, tried to salvage it with charm. Look, I'm a fan, I swear you know that, he said. Jonathan looked at him, smiling again, warmer this time. Then maybe act like it next time, he replied. For the first time that night, Jimmy leaned back and let the silence sit. There was nothing left to spin, no punchline to hide behind, and the audience could feel it too. Something authentic had just happened, but what neither of them knew was that millions of people were about to feel it too, and they wouldn't keep quiet about it. As the segment crawled forward, Jimmy tried to regain his footing. He fumbled through the next question, pretending to shuffle his cards, even though everyone knew the moment had already taken over the show. So this project, Heart of the City, right? It's your, third big series, right? Jimmy stumbled. Jonathan didn't miss a beat. Fourth, he corrected smoothly, with a touch of proud precision. But it's okay. I know Hollywood math can be tricky. Another round of gasps and laughter. This one wasn't mean, it wasn't hostile. It was sharp, but it danced. Even Jimmy let out a genuine laugh. It was the kind of laugh that admitted defeat, like a boxer who'd been knocked out in the second round and knew there was no point in pretending anymore. He nodded almost to himself, then looked over at Jonathan again. All right, he said. I think we're learning tonight that you are not to be messed with. Jonathan smiled again, but this one had warmth behind it. I think we're just learning that it's okay to stand up for yourself when someone tries to make you small, he said. The audience clapped, not the wild, whooping kind of applause that comes from spectacle, but steady, respectful, and longer than usual. Jimmy leaned into that moment. You know, he said, this time without sarcasm, people think this job is easy, make some jokes, flirt a little, crack wise with the guests. But sometimes I forget y'all are real people, like with actual feelings and pride in what you do. That felt honest, and Jonathan heard it. I don't mind jokes, he replied, his tone softening. I laugh at myself all the time. But if you're going to throw punches, make sure you're not punching down, because that's when it stops being funny. There it was, the difference, and Jimmy nodded slowly. Fair, he said, totally fair. At this point, the crew backstage was wide-eyed. The director motioned to the control room. Stay on them. Don't cut to commercial yet. They knew what was happening. This wasn't a PR disaster. It wasn't a meltdown. It was a real, spontaneous, human moment. Exactly the kind of thing that would blow up online. And it did. Before the segment even wrapped, a production assistant offstage had already texted a friend. Jonathan Roumie just shut Jimmy down. This is going to be everywhere in 5 minutes. They weren't wrong. 5 minutes later, clips of Jonathan's comeback started circulating. Someone had filmed a live snippet from the studio audience and posted it with the caption, Jonathan Roumie just ended Jimmy Kimmel in 8 seconds flat. Another viewer tweeted, when a man who's been underestimated his whole career decides he's had enough. Whoa, Jonathan ain't here to play. The band finished the segment with a tongue-in-cheek rendition of Eye of the Tiger, and even Jimmy cracked up. He knew it was fitting. He also knew he'd stepped in it. As the credits rolled, Jonathan thanked the crew, shook hands with the stage manager, and slipped out without fanfare. No victory lap, no gloating backstage, just a quiet nod to his team and a quick, "Let's go, y'all. Got a flight in the morning." Back in the green room, a young intern turned to a producer. "I didn't think it would go like that." The producer sipped his coffee and smiled. "That's because you're used to people who laugh it off when they get disrespected. Jonathan's built different." Outside the studio, a small group of fans who'd been waiting for autographs now held up their phones, watching the viral clip on repeat instead. But the real storm wasn't the moment. It was what came next once the world started weighing in. When the cameras cut to commercial, Jimmy let out a deep breath that almost sounded like a sigh of relief. He leaned back in his chair and looked over at Jonathan. He was sipping from a water bottle, cool and composed, like he hadn't just taken control of a national broadcast. Jimmy tried to break the tension with a grin. "Well, that was something," he said, his voice light, but his eyes searching for reassurance. Jonathan met his gaze. "You all right?" he asked, tone friendly, but even, like a coach checking on a player who just took a bad hit. Jimmy laughed again, this time with a little more humility. "I think I'll live." The floor manager walked over with a clipboard, murmured something about timing, and signaled for the final wrap-up segment. Jimmy nodded, then turned to Jonathan one last time as they prepped to go back live. "You want to plug your next project again?" Jimmy asked. Jonathan smiled politely. "Sure," he said, and the cameras came back up, the lights hitting hard. "We'll be right back with more Jimmy Kimmel Live," Jimmy announced before turning to Jonathan. "But before we go, Jonathan Roumie's new series Heart of the City drops everywhere this Friday. You can stream it now, just maybe don't call it trash TV drama," Jimmy said with a sheepish smile. Jonathan smirked. "Or do. Either way, it's going to be a hit." The crowd erupted one more time, the laughter mixing with applause. It felt lighter now, not because the tension was gone, but because everyone had finally acknowledged it. The band played them out, and as the lights dimmed and the camera panned away, Jimmy turned to Jonathan again. "Seriously," he said, voice a little lower this time, "you were right to check me." Jonathan looked at him, not cold, not condescending, just honest. "It wasn't about being right, Jimmy. It was about not letting things slide anymore." Jimmy nodded. That was it. Backstage, there was a buzz among the crew. Not the fake PR kind of energy you get when a big celebrity walks through. This was different. It felt like they had just witnessed something rare, unscripted, direct and real. You don't get that much in a room built on cue cards and commercial breaks. Jonathan's team gathered his things as he stepped off the set. His publicist asked quietly, "You okay?" Jonathan smiled. "I'm better than okay." Meanwhile, in the editing bay, the show's staff had already flagged the moment for YouTube. "This comeback's gonna hit 1 million views before sunrise," one of them mumbled, dragging the clip into the overnight highlights reel. They weren't wrong. By the time Jonathan reached his hotel 30 minutes later, his phone was already buzzing nonstop. His manager texted, "The internet's on fire. You broke the algorithm." He opened Twitter. Jonathan Roumie's name started trending with tags like "Jonathan claps back," "Actor with class," and "Don't mess with Jonathan." Screenshots of Jimmy's face after Jonathan's comeback were already being turned into memes. TikTok creators were stitching the clip with reactions ranging from mock rewinds to side-by-side commentary on how to handle disrespect with grace. People were eating it up, not just because it was spicy, but because it felt honest. Some late-night hosts tried to make a joke of it. Others stayed quiet, likely taking notes. A few industry insiders started weighing in online. Actors like Paul Wesley and Theo James dropped subtle messages of support on Instagram. Nothing dramatic, but the kind of quiet nods that spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Jimmy stayed quiet. No tweets, no statement, no press spin. His team knew there was nothing to gain by defending a joke that landed wrong. And honestly, Jimmy knew too. This wasn't cancel culture. It wasn't even outrage. It was a moment of clarity that happened to unfold in front of a national audience. Back in his hotel suite, Jonathan kicked off his shoes, sat on the couch, and opened his laptop. He watched the clip once, only once, then closed the tab. He looked over at his assistant and said, "Okay, let's get some sleep." But sleep wouldn't come easy for everyone that night, especially not for the people who thought TV actors were easy targets. By 7 a.m. the next morning, Jonathan Roumie's name had blanketed nearly every social media feed across the country. It wasn't just fans talking anymore. It was everybody. News anchors, podcast hosts, former guests, artists, bloggers, TikTokers, and even a few college professors found a way to join the conversation. Somehow, Jonathan's quiet but surgical clapback had become a cultural event. On Good Morning America, the entertainment anchor opened the segment with, "Jonathan Roumie showed last night that you don't need to raise your voice to raise the standard." Even more surprising were the calls Jonathan's team had to field. Journalists wanted interviews, not about the new series, but about what it meant for a man in entertainment to draw a line without making it look like a tantrum. Several major publications, from Variety to Billboard, ran pieces with headlines like, "Jonathan Roumie didn't snap, he strategized, the power of stillness, and what Jonathan taught late-night TV." It was everywhere. Jonathan didn't post anything right away. He didn't need to. His silence had become part of the story. People respected that. They read his restraint as confidence, not avoidance. It wasn't until 11 a.m. that he finally shared something on his Instagram story, a photo of a coffee mug that said, "Make them uncomfortable with kindness," with no caption. That was all. The comments poured in. "Queen move, handled like a grown man with nothing to prove, and this is why he's lasting in the business." Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel stayed off social media. No tweet, no monologue. The next night's episode opened with a different tone. He avoided any references to Jonathan. The studio audience picked up on it too. They cheered a little less, laughed a little more cautiously. There was no announcement, but everyone could feel that something had changed. In entertainment circles, the ripple widened. A producer from another late-night show tweeted, "This wasn't about TV drama, this was about respect," and Jonathan clocked it faster than anyone I've seen in years. A veteran TV critic in Austin wrote a blog post that went semi-viral. "You can tell a lot about someone by how they respond to being underestimated." Jonathan didn't cry, didn't storm off. He just opened the blinds and let everyone see the room a little clearer. Even comedians started chiming in carefully. One well-known stand-up posted, "Let this be the year we retire trashy as a punchline for things men make." For Jonathan, though, the win wasn't about going viral. It was about reclaiming the narrative. Too often, he'd had to smile through moments where someone in a suit thought it was okay to take a jab just because his acting style leaned mainstream. But this time, he didn't let it go. And the world respected him more for it. His fan base doubled down, of course. TV forums lit up with comments like, "I've been a fan since The Chosen, and I've never been prouder. And this is how men of character shut down nonsense with class, not chaos." More surprising were the new fans. People who had never seen a single episode of The Chosen, downloading his latest projects out of sheer admiration. One woman on TikTok said, "I'm a punk girl from Portland and had zero interest in drama shows. But after last night, I streamed everything I could find with Jonathan in it." Respect is respect. Backstage at a major TV station in Nashville, DJ Trent Langley opened his morning show with a bold statement. "This is what happens when someone who's been quiet too long finally says no more. And y'all better listen, because Jonathan ain't gonna repeat himself." That line became a soundbite replayed across multiple radio stations throughout the week. But this wasn't just about Jonathan. His moment had started a conversation that went deeper, about how men in the industry are expected to be humble, agreeable, and endlessly accommodating, how humor often comes at the expense of dignity, and about how sometimes the strongest thing you can do is smile and say exactly what needs to be said. While the world was catching up, there was more to the story than what people saw on their screens. Behind the scenes, even bigger shifts were quietly underway. 2 days later, a quiet but significant story started bubbling beneath the surface. It wasn't front-page gossip, it came from within the studio. Production assistants, makeup artists, and stage techs who'd been backstage the night of the interview started talking. Not to reporters, not on record, but enough murmurs leaked to give the world a clearer picture of what had really gone down after the cameras stopped rolling. One crew member, speaking off the record to a small entertainment blog based in Minneapolis, described the backstage vibe as tense, like walking on glass, until Jonathan walked past and thanked everyone individually like nothing had happened. The writer paused in their blog post to reflect on that detail. It's always telling when the most famous person in the room is also the calmest. That same day, another person, an intern working wardrobe that week, posted a TikTok video explaining how she watched Jonathan, still in his suit, help another assistant pick up fallen accessories after a garment rack tipped over in the hallway. He just smiled and said, "Hey, I've been on the road longer than these wheels. Happens all the time." I mean, who does that after going toe-to-toe with Jimmy Kimmel, On live TV, that kind of grace doesn't get captured in highlight reels. It was the stuff people rarely see, the moments when reputations are cemented, not with cameras rolling, but when no one's supposed to be watching. Meanwhile, rumors started circulating that Jimmy hadn't taken the incident quite as lightly as he appeared on air. One late-night staffer said he stormed off stage during a commercial break, asking why no one gave him a heads up about Jonathan being that sharp. A veteran writer from the show pushed back, reportedly saying, "He didn't come in looking to take you down. You set the stage yourself." The show's producers, wanting to avoid further friction, quietly shelved plans to rebroadcast the segment as part of a best of week they'd been preparing internally. It was understood, don't mess with the clip, let it ride on its own. And it did. Outside the studio world, Jonathan's longtime collaborators were speaking up. His acting coach, Marlene Keene, posted a rare message on Instagram. "Jonathan has always been fierce in rehearsal and gentle in public. It's good to see the world finally recognizing both." Industry insiders also started whispering about a shift in tone across other platforms. The booking team over at another late-night show in LA reportedly restructured how they prepared guests, scrapping snarky jokes from the pre-interview and making space for more balanced conversations. "People don't want to watch artists get baited," one network exec told an insider podcast. "They want real conversations." Jonathan just reminded us why. And while Jonathan stayed silent about the matter, his actions spoke volumes. He announced 3 surprise pop-up performances in smaller cities, Bakersfield, Fresno, and Tallahassee, saying he wanted to thank the fans who'd stood by him through the noise. Tickets sold out in under an hour. The local venues hadn't hosted national stars in years. When Jonathan walked out on stage in Bakersfield, the crowd erupted. He opened with "Blown Away," and before the second verse hit, fans were already holding up handwritten signs that read "Class over Clout" and "Country Pop with Teeth." Even his critics had to admit Jonathan wasn't just writing a moment, he was steering it back. In LA, Jimmy held a closed-door meeting with his writing staff. One assistant reportedly said the room was unusually quiet. No jokes, just reflection. That might have been the most unexpected part of the whole fallout. Not that Jonathan stood up for himself, but that people actually listened. Still, the bigger picture wasn't about Jimmy or a single TV segment. It was about what this moment revealed about how we treat men when they stop laughing along. Jonathan Roumie didn't set out to make a statement that night. He wasn't looking to flip the script on late-night TV or spark an industry-wide conversation. He came to talk about an album, promote a tour, sit in the chair, and do the thing artists are expected to do: smile, stay polite, play along. But something shifted in that studio. One offhand comment meant to be clever, maybe even harmless, pulled back a curtain that had been hanging for years. And when Jonathan chose not to brush it off, people paid attention. Because the truth is, every person in that audience, every person watching from home, knew that moment. They knew what it felt like to laugh at a joke that wasn't funny, to sit there and smile while someone talked down to them with a grin on their face, to feel that tightness in your chest when someone disrespects your work, then expects you to play nice about it. And they saw Jonathan do something rare. He didn't explode, he didn't fight, he didn't fold. He responded with precision, with calm, with dignity, and it worked. What followed wasn't just applause, it was recognition. A subtle but seismic shift. One where artists, especially men, were reminded that they don't have to grin through the insult just to protect someone else's comfort. At a university panel in Phoenix the following week, a communications professor showed the clip to her students. "This," she said, "is what boundaries look like when they're respected. Not forced, not screamed, just stated." The impact stretched far beyond the stage. A young songwriter in Tulsa wrote a blog post about how she'd been told by male producers to tone down the emotion in her lyrics because it sounded too country and not enough pop. She ended the post by saying, "After watching Jonathan, I think I'll keep the emotion." A mother in Santa Fe posted a video on Facebook saying her 13-year-old daughter, obsessed with music, asked her what it meant when someone called your work trashy. The mother explained it carefully. Then they watched the clip together. She watched it 5 times. "She asked me why Jonathan smiled," the mom said. "I told her, because sometimes a smile is stronger than a scream." Even some of Jonathan's old critics were revisiting their assumptions. An opinion columnist who once dismissed his acting as polished but generic wrote a full retraction piece, ending with, "Maybe it wasn't the acting that was generic. Maybe it was my expectations. Jonathan? He just kept moving." He showed up to his next interview, this time on a podcast, with the same grace he always carried. The host gently asked, "Do you ever get tired of having to be gracious all the time?" Jonathan paused, then said, "I don't mind being gracious. I just don't want people to mistake it for weakness." That line would get quoted in hundreds of posts over the next week, not because it was bold, but because it was true. In an industry where men are often expected to either endure quietly or push back loudly and be labeled difficult, Jonathan carved out a different space. And that space is where so many others began to breathe. It's where boundaries became normal, where silence didn't mean surrender, where strength didn't always have to shout. Because the biggest takeaway from that night wasn't that Jonathan had the perfect comeback. It was that he reminded everyone watching, especially young men, that you can demand respect without raising your voice. You can correct someone without tearing them down. And when the world tries to write you off with a punchline, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is finish the sentence yourself. That's what Jonathan did, and it echoed far beyond that stage. So the next time someone laughs at your dream, mocks your work, or questions your worth behind a crooked smile, remember this: you don't need to prove anything. You just need to respond like you know who you are. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a time when you had to stand your ground or wished you had, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. More stories like this are coming. You won't want to miss them.